Hey everyone, welcome to my channel or welcome back. So today I'm going to be doing my October Pan Those Eyeshadows update and I'm excited. This one started off a little bit slower, but I did get a little bit of momentum going towards the end of the month. It doesn't help that I'm filming this one about a week late just because I've been so busy, but regardless, I do have a couple of shades that I've hit goals on that are going to be rolling out and one shade that is going to be going because it's a little bit too similar to my new Pan That palette. I've also decided that now that I do have a full-size Pan That palette again, I'm going to be going back down from a quintet to a quartet. So I'm going to be just dropping one of those shades and rolling two new shades in. Having said all of that, this is the color story that I've been working on over the last month. So this top shade is Matheo from the Melt Gemini 2 palette. This is Zoned Out from Colourpop, Lilac You a Lot, Golden Ochre from Modern Renaissance, She's in Parties from the Melt She's in Parties palette, and Bloodline by Clionadh Cosmetics. So all in all, a decent color story. These two have been a little bit more of a challenge for me this last month because they're not really shades that I would necessarily gravitate towards this time of year, but having this deep green and the burgundy in have been really fun for fall, as well as Golden Ochre, which is very easy to incorporate transition shade. So as always, I'm going to start off with my least used shade. So if you watched my last update, you're probably not going to be super surprised that it's Bloodline. I was just 2 uses short of hitting my 20 uses goal last time, so I did use it an additional 2 times to hit my 20 uses. I will be rolling this one out. I have not hit pan on this one yet. Surprisingly, I thought I would for sure. I was expecting, I think, in about 15 uses, and I'm at 20 and still not quite there yet. I think I'm pretty close, but I do feel like it's time to roll this one out and get something fresh in its place. I did really enjoy having this one in during the summer, especially during that really brief stint when I did have pink hair. RIP, I do miss it. This one definitely is looking a lot more used and loved than when I rolled it in. When I rolled it in, I did have a little bit of a dip. It wasn't super deep. Now I have a really deep dip in this one. Still no pan, but I feel like I'm pretty close, and I'm really glad that I've gotten a chance to play around with the shadow more and get to know it, and it is really beautiful. It's sort of got that pink base with gold sparkles that shift from being gold through turquoise, teal, and purple. Very pretty, like nothing else I have in my collection, but it has been in for a while, so I'm going to be glad to get something new in its place. So next up, we've got Zoned Out, which is from the Lilac You a Lot palette. This also rolled in last month. I should stop saying that because everything except for Bloodline rolled in last month. This is a palette on the whole that's gotten quite a bit of love in my collection. I really do enjoy reaching for it. However, Colourpop's formula, especially the matte formula, does take a while to show progress. I've used Zoned Out 3 times since rolling it in last month. Like I said in the intro, this is a really fun palette and I really do enjoy it, but these are just not colors that I really gravitate towards or want to use this time of year. So I wouldn't say that I've been struggling with having the shade in. It's just that I'm a little bit less inspired to use it right now. I'm sure once we start to like really cool down and hit like November, December, I will probably want to reach for this one a little bit more. But for October, I've just been really into the warm tones and the greens, and this obviously is not one of those shades. So I did have a little bit of a dip on this one when I rolled it in, just a very tiny one. Typically I use the shade with a fluffy brush as a transition shade. Because of that and just how deep these pans are, I would be very surprised if I did hit pan on this one in 20 uses, and I've sort of accepted that this one will most likely be in until this project ends in mid-December. I'm not really seeing any significant changes on this one since the last update. It still has a pretty wide shallow dip, and I think that that probably will remain the same throughout the next month. I do want to reach for this one at least a couple times, but I'm not going to be really like pushing myself to use this one a bunch. I'll just sort of use it when I feel like it, and we'll just kind of see how things go. So next up, we've got the shade Matheo from my Gemini 2 palette. I was really excited when this rolled in because it is a deep green, and we know that I love deep greens. I feel like I've been wearing green eyeshadow in like my last 3 Pan Those Eyeshadows updates. Didn't plan it, just clearly we're sensing a theme here. Needless to say, I was very excited when this one came in, and I found over the last month or so that even though I'm not afraid of a deep lid shade, and I would say I do like a smoky eye or grungier vibes on a more regular basis, I will say with this one, I find it is just like a smidgen dark for the office. So I didn't reach for this one as much as I probably would have under normal circumstances. I've also just had a very hectic month. I've been adapting to a new position. My band has been playing a lot of gigs, and I've just been meeting a bunch of new people and making first impressions. I've been opting for more neutral looks, and this shade has been a little bit more difficult to incorporate, just going along with that vibe. But I think now that I'm a little bit more settled and things hopefully should be calming down a little bit, I think I'll be able to get more usage out of this one by the next update. I still feel like I made a little bit of visible progress. So when the shade came in last month, it did have a little bit of a disturbance in the pan. I wouldn't say with 3 uses that it's necessarily graduated to a dip yet, but I would say that I do have a little bit more noticeable usage on it, so I'm not mad about that. And I think as we sort of head into November and December, I think I will be reaching for this palette quite a bit. I would be surprised if I panned the shade in 20 uses, just knowing how deep Melt's pans are and how pigmented their shades are, and also knowing that if I want to make this work for the office, I'm probably going to have to mix it with other shades. But I do really enjoy this palette, and even though I think this one will most likely be until the end of this project, I am still really happy to have this one in. I think overall this is a gorgeous palette, and I think it's kind of, for me, an expanded version of Mini Retro and what I wish Mini Retro had been in terms of the combinations of greens and pinks, but being a little bit more saturated and deep and grungy. I found Mini Retro I really wanted to like. A lot of the shades didn't look quite right on my skin tone. This is a dream and I love it, and I'm really happy that it's staying in. So next up we've got Cheese and Parties from the Melt Cheese and Parties palette. When this one came in, it already had a really solid dip on it. I knew I was pretty close to pan. This was in this project this time last year, and my usage goal last year was 30 uses, so I had a lot more progress on this one starting out. And like Matheo, this is definitely a deep shade, as Melt really likes to include in their palettes. Unlike Sleepwalk, which I just rolled out as of the last update, this is a couple of shades lighter. Because it's a little bit more burgundy, I find it to be more wearable, so I was really happy to have this one in. I also figured it would be maybe not necessarily like a gimme shade, but a shade that was a little bit easier to probably get rolled out by the next update, simply because I had so much progress on this one starting out. And as predicted, I did manage to hit pan on this one. It took me 5 uses. I really enjoyed having this one in. I used it frequently as the one and done lid shade, so because this has more of a blackened base, you can kind of pack it all over the lid and really bring out that shimmer, and then you can use a fluffy brush to diffuse it up through the crease and run it along the lower lash line and you're good to go. So I did do that a couple of times and I really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed combining this with my Pan That palette, which does have some similar tones. This altogether was really fun to have in. I'm also really happy to have finally hit pan on the shade, because obviously I got very close as of the last time it was in this project, and I've used it quite a few times since then. So yeah, super happy to have another pan on this palette. This is one of my favorites, especially for late fall going into winter. So I'm really excited to have had this one in, but it is going to be rolling out. And lastly, we've got the shade Golden Ochre. This one also rolled in last month, so I've used this one 6 times, and I thought I was going to hit pan on this one, and I think under normal circumstances I would have. ABH shades I think are notoriously easy to pan, at least most of them are, and this is their classic quite loosely pressed powdery formula. Under normal circumstances I would have been able to hit pan on this one had I used it a couple of more times. I did have a little bit of a dip going on in this one when I rolled it in. I had definitely used it quite a few times. I definitely have much more of a defined dip, but no pan yet, although I would imagine I'm only a handful of uses away now. This one was a little bit more difficult for me to incorporate this month because I filmed my last update about a week or so before I picked and started working on my new Pan That palette, and generally speaking I could use this one as a transition shade with my Pan That palette. For a lot of early mornings I'm not going to open up this palette for one shade. There is a similar shade in my Pan That palette that is a couple of shades darker but can be diffused with a fluffy brush to get a very similar look to Golden Ochre. So generally speaking with this palette I wasn't opening it for one shade and then using my Pan That palette for the rest of it, unless I really had time, which a lot of mornings I just straight up did not. So I am going to be rolling this one out this month as well. I imagine if I left it in for another month I probably could hit pan on this one, but I think just the way things are going I would rather focus on my Pan That palette for right now, and then once I do finish that shade that can be functionally similar, this would definitely be open to rolling back in. So that's what I'm going to do, at least for right now. So that is all my progress for this month. A little bit slower than some other months. I've just been so busy and I've had so many very early mornings that I just sort of didn't want to have a bunch of palettes open if I could otherwise avoid it. I was generally more inclined to reach for just one palette, or just one to maybe pull in one other shade if I had a couple more minutes. I think for the most part with this color story it was more of like a mix and matchy kind of color story. There were certain shades that I did choose to use together. So for example, Golden Ochre worked really well with both Matheo and Cheese and Parties, and I was able to use Zoned Out with both Cheese and Parties and Bloodline. So that's kind of like the progress for this month. A little bit slower than I wanted, but I still did hit one pan even if it was kind of a gimme, and I'm really glad to have finally reached my usage goal on Bloodline to just be able to roll that one out. So moving on to my pan percentage, that has changed a little bit. As of the last update I had a bunch of new palettes that I had just counted, so my number of total pans had jumped quite a bit. Even though that jump happened over about 2 months, I didn't count them before my I guess like August update, counted them in September. So I had hit 28 pans out of 221 total pans of eyeshadow for a pan percentage of 12.8% if we round up a little bit. So this month I've been able to finish up 1 pan of eyeshadow. So my number of total pans has gone down to 220, but then I've also hit 2 additional pans, 1 in this project and 1 in my Pan That palette. So my total number of pans hit has gone up to 29 out of 220. So that brings me to a current pan percentage of 13.2% if we round up a little bit. So I expect that this number might fluctuate a little bit over the coming months. I have 1 shade left that I'm hoping to finish from my original Pan That palette for this year, and I have started my next one a little bit early, so I won't be surprised if this ends up falling a little bit, but I think it'll rebound once I really start to make some momentum on my new Pan That palette, and hopefully I'll get some shades that I can pan a little bit more easily in this project going forward, even though we only have like what, 2 more months before I wind this one down for the year, which is crazy. So I think it's time for me to roll in my new shades. I'm going to be rolling in 2 new shades, and we're just going to consider Golden Ochre to be a wash so I can drop back back down to 4 shades, as I kind of feel like is reasonable for the amount of stuff that I have on the go right now and the number of eyelids that I have. So this is set from 1 to 163, and I'm going to roll for 2 shades. Okay, so I got numbers 22 and 64, which are older palettes in my collection. So number 22 comes from my Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. So a couple swatches later, this is what I'm working with. So it's interesting. I think Matheo is definitely much more of an outlier now. I think these guys could work together, and then these two, and then I might be able to get some sort of sunset eye sort of situation. I also think that I might be able to use Cindy very lightly as a transition shade for Matheo and some greens on top. So I think there are definitely options. This is maybe not the most cohesive color story, but it's fun and it's punchy and I like it. I think I'll have some fun playing around with this one over the next month or so, especially as hopefully my schedule settles down a little bit and I've got a little bit more time to just like play and enjoy the process of doing my makeup, whereas recently it's been a little bit more utilitarian. So these are what my two new shades look like as starters. As I think you can tell, Carnelian has a tiny little dip on it. And then the next one that I have is Cindy. This one and Stev, I believe, are both pressed pigment, so they are a little bit more firmly pressed and don't kick up the same way some of the other mattes do in this palette, or ABH mattes in general. So this one, as you guys can see, has a little bit of a dip, but nothing particularly intense. I would say if I had to guess that I'm probably about halfway to pan on that one. So in terms of goals for the next update, I think the only shade that I really have any hope of hitting pan on would be Cindy. That one I would say I'm about halfway to pan if I had to guess. That one is much more firmly pressed than a lot of the other ABH mattes, but I think if I really focused in on it, I think I might be able to get there. For the rest of them, I don't think I will be anywhere near pan or any usage goals, especially because Zoned Out and Matheo only have 3 uses. I'm definitely not going to be able to use either one of them 17 times in the next like month or so. And Carnelian is also just a very pigmented shade. Natasha Denona pans are deep, which they should be for how expensive they are, but they're also very pigmented. And I imagine if I were to want to incorporate that one in more work appropriate looks, I would probably be going in with a fairly light hand. So I don't expect I will get anywhere near pan on that one by the end of this project. So I think I'm just going to be sort of focusing on Cindy and just trying to get some more even usage and more usage on everything else. Ideally, I like to aim for at least 5 uses on every shade each update. Obviously fell a little short on most of my shades this month, so I'm hoping I'll be able to just get more usage on everything and get some more visible progress happening. So I think that is pretty much everything that I have for this update. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you're doing this project, feel free to let me know down below what you're working on and how it's going for you. If you enjoyed the video and you haven't already subscribed, feel free to hit the subscribe button. Feel free to like it if you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will catch you in the next one. Bye!